You're there in the early hours of December 31st, watching the people around you make promises for the new year, crafting lists of changes, proclaiming that this time it will be different, and something inside you remains still, almost skeptical, as if you're watching a theatre play that you're no longer part of. It's not cynicism you feel, not superiority or bitterness. It's something deeper, more truthful. It's the recognition that whoever has already awakened to the reality of existence understands that the passage of time, by itself, transforms nothing. You've realized that real change doesn't happen with fireworks in the sky, but in the silence of consciousness that finally accepts what has always been there. Life as it really is, without the illusions that most still need to cultivate, to bear the weight of days. Albert Camus understood this sensation with almost painful precision. For him, the awakened man is one who has already crossed what he called the divorce between the human need to find meaning and the obstinate silence of the universe. When you reach this point of consciousness, social conventions about renewal and fresh starts seem curiously superficial, not because they're bad or wrong, but because you already know that true transformation doesn't depend on calendars or collective rituals. It depends on an internal revolution that happens when we stop running from ourselves and finally look straight at what we are, without masks, without excuses, without the need to invent improved versions of our existence. This awakening brings with it a kind of philosophical solitude, but also an extraordinary freedom, the freedom to live authentically without needing the emotional crutches that support those who haven't yet confronted the fundamental absurd of the human condition. The absurd, for Camus, isn't something negative that needs to be overcome or resolved. It's simply the observation that there exists an irreducible incompatibility between our search for meaning and the indifferent nature of the world. When you understand this deeply, not as an intellectual concept but as lived experience, something changes forever in your relationship with social and personal expectations. You realize that the anguish many people feel at the turn of the year, this pressure to reinvent themselves, to leave the past behind, to become someone better, arises precisely from the illusion that there exists a predetermined meaning for our existence, a script to be followed, an ideal person we must become. But whoever has awakened knows that no such script exists. There is no ideal self waiting to be discovered or constructed. There is only this moment, this breath, this consciousness that observes life unfolding without the need for it to be different from what it is. This understanding doesn't make you apathetic or hopeless. On the contrary, it liberates an extraordinary energy that was previously imprisoned in the fruitless search for certainties and guarantees that the universe never offered. You stop wasting time trying to discover what your life's purpose is and begin to live with an intensity that's only possible when we completely accept the absence of purposes given in advance. Each of your actions begins to arise from genuine choice, not from obligation imposed by external or internal expectations. You act because you choose to act, love because you choose to love. Create because you choose to create, not because these actions will take you somewhere specific or because they'll transform you into the right person. This is the revolt that Camus spoke of. This radical affirmation of life, even in the face of definitive meaninglessness. This refusal to submit to both despair and the false hopes that keep us trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction and seeking. Observe the people around you at this time of year. They talk about leaving the past behind as if it were possible, as if we could simply decree that from a specific date we'll be different. But you who have awakened know that the past isn't something we leave behind. It's something we carry with us that constitutes us, that forms an inseparable part of who we are. The difference isn't in denying or abandoning the past, but in changing our relationship with it. When we completely accept our history, when we stop fighting against what has already happened, when we stop punishing ourselves for choices we made with the consciousness we had at the time, something liberates itself in us. We no longer need the fantasy of a new beginning because we realize that each moment is already a beginning in itself. Each breath is an opportunity to choose who we want to be now, in this instant, not in the hypothetical future that New Year's resolutions promise. Society organizes itself entirely around the idea of linear progress, constant development, continuous improvement. And there's a beauty in this search, a touching sincerity in the human desire to grow and evolve. But whoever has gone through the philosophical awakening that Camus described realizes that this logic of progress, when taken to extremes, can become just another form of escape from present reality. We become so obsessed with becoming better that we forget to be who we already are. We spend so much time planning the person we're going to become that we neglect the person we inhabit now. And here lies a profound irony. Often, it's precisely when we stop trying to improve compulsively that real transformation happens, not because we seek it, but because we're finally present enough to allow life to transform us naturally, at its own pace, through experiences we live with total surrender and attention. Have you noticed how there's something almost desperate in the way people cling to New Year's symbolism? As if the universe were going to redistribute the cards simply because we changed the number on the calendar. This hope has something touching about it, but also reveals how much we still need external rituals to give ourselves permission to change internally. The awakened man, in Camus's view, doesn't need this permission. He has understood that the only real authority over his existence is himself, and that this authority can be exercised at any moment, not just on specific dates socially marked as moments of transition. He knows he can choose to be different now. In this second, you're reading these words not because it's New Year's, but simply because he's a conscious being endowed with the capacity for choice. This is a freedom both frightening and liberating, discovering that you don't need to wait for any external condition to begin living according to your deepest truth. Perhaps you recognize yourself in this description. Perhaps you also feel this strange solitude of someone who sees things from a perspective slightly different from the majority. If so, I want you to know that this isn't a sign of superiority or alienation. It's simply the natural result of a process of philosophical maturation that some people go through before others. And I want to ask you a direct question now. Have you ever felt this sensation of watching life from the outside, as if you were an observer of a play whose rules you understand, but choose not to participate in completely? If the answer is yes, leave a comment saying simply, "I feel this too." Your response will help other people realize they're not alone in this awakening experience. Sometimes we need to know that others have also gone through this transformation of consciousness to validate our own internal journey. But let's return to the heart of the matter. What really changes when we awaken to the absurd of existence? The first thing that changes is our relationship with time. We stop living always in the future, always waiting for the next phase of life to finally bring us the fulfillment we seek. We begin to inhabit the present, not as a wellness strategy or mindfulness technique, but as the only place where life really happens. We discover that all the search for meaning that kept us anxious and dissatisfied was, in fact, a sophisticated form of escape from the current moment. When we accept that there's no meaning given in advance for our existence, paradoxically, we become capable of creating our own meanings, authentic ones, that arise from our concrete choices, not from abstract theories about what life should be. The second profound change is in our relationship with suffering. Not that it disappears. That would be impossible and even undesirable, since suffering is part of the complete texture of human experience. But we change our posture toward it. We stop interpreting suffering as evidence that something is wrong with us or with our life. We begin to see it as an integral part of the process of being alive, like the shadow that gives depth and contrast to moments of joy and peace. This acceptance isn't passive resignation, it's active recognition, recognizing that fighting against the fundamental nature of existence is more painful than accepting its contradictions and ambiguities. When we stop demanding that life be different from what it is, we create space to appreciate what it really offers, including its imperfect beauty and its paradoxical coherence. The third transformation happens in our relationship with other people. When you stop projecting your unrealized expectations onto others, when you stop expecting them to fill the voids that only you can fill, your relationships become lighter and at the same time deeper. You can love without needing to possess. You can connect without needing to merge. You can accept others' limitations because you've accepted your own limitations. This is one of the most liberating discoveries of philosophical awakening. Realizing that you don't need to be completed by anyone because you're already complete in your incompleteness, already whole in your fragmentation, already sufficient in your constant transformation. And when you relate from this completeness, your bonds become free choices, not desperate necessities. There's also a fundamental change in your relationship with your own desires and ambitions. You don't stop desiring or having objectives, but you change the quality of this pursuit. Your desires become more authentic because they no longer need to serve the construction of an ideal image of yourself. You can want things simply because you want them, not because they'll transform you into the right person. You can pursue objectives for the pleasure of the pursuit itself, not just for the final result. This change liberates extraordinary creative energy because you're no longer spending half your strength trying to be someone you're not. All your energy can be directed toward expressing who you really are here and now, with all the contradictions and complexities that implies. Camus had a word for this way of living: passion. Not passion as intense and fleeting emotion, but passion as total surrender to the act of living, even knowing that this act doesn't lead us to any glorious final destination. It's the passion of Sisyphus, who pushes his stone up the mountain knowing it will roll back down, but who finds his fulfillment in the very act of pushing, in the very quality of his presence during the task. This passion is only possible when we abandon the need for our actions to have eternal consequences or transcendent meanings. When we act simply because we choose to act, when we create simply because we choose to create, when we love simply because we choose to love. This is the radical freedom born of awakening, the freedom to live intensely without needing to justify this intensity to anyone, not even to ourselves. And that's why the turn of the year doesn't change whoever is awakened. Not because you've become superior or indifferent to society's collective rhythms, but because you've discovered that you carry within yourself the capacity to begin again at any instant. You don't need to wait for January to change direction. You don't need a special date to forgive yourself. You don't need external rituals to connect with your deepest essence. You've awakened to the fact that each moment contains all possibilities. Each breath is an opportunity to consciously choose who you want to be now. This consciousness doesn't separate you from other people. It actually connects you with them more genuinely, because you can meet them where they are without needing them to be where you are. There's something deeply moving in observing humanity in its constant search for renewal and hope. Even when you've already awakened to the reality of the absurd, you can appreciate the beauty of this search without needing to participate in it, literally. You can celebrate with those who celebrate. You can respect the rituals that give meaning to other people's lives. You can even participate in them when it makes sense to you, but always from your own conscious choice, not from a compulsive need for belonging or a desperate search for external transformation. If you've made it this far in this reflection, you probably already know you're part of an invisible community of people who have gone through this awakening process. And if you feel that this space resonates with your life experience, if these words echo something you already intuited but perhaps couldn't completely express, I invite you to join us here. Not as another attempt to find ready answers or definitive solutions, but as a place where we can explore together the great questions of human existence with honesty and depth. A place where you don't need to pretend you have everything figured out, where you can bring your doubts and contradictions, where you can be exactly who you are at whatever stage of understanding you find yourself in now. This journey of philosophical awakening isn't solitary, even when it seems to be. There exists a silent brotherhood among those who have chosen to look at life head-on, without consoling filters, without comforting illusions, but also without nihilistic despair. It's a brotherhood based on mutual recognition that it's possible to live with intensity and joy precisely because we accept the uncertain and absurd nature of existence. That it's possible to find beauty in life, not despite its lack of predetermined meaning, but exactly because of this absence of fixed script that gives us the freedom to write our own story at each moment. The awakened man, in Camus's understanding, isn't the man who gave up living fully. He's the man who finally began to truly live because he stopped waiting for permission, stopped seeking guarantees, stopped demanding that reality be different from what it is. He embraced the fundamental paradox of the human condition. We are beings who seek meaning in a universe that doesn't offer ready-made meanings, and it's exactly in this space between search and silence that our freedom and creativity flourish. We don't need to resolve this paradox. We need only to inhabit it with courage and elegance, transforming the very experience of living into a form of art, into a unique and unrepeatable expression of consciousness that never existed before and will never exist again. So while fireworks explode in the sky and promises echo through the streets, you remain serene in your own truth. Not because you're better or worse than others, but because you've found a way of existing that doesn't depend on external validation or dramatic transformations. You've discovered that the most extraordinary life is often the simplest. One lived with full presence, with total acceptance of what is, with courage to be exactly who you are in each moment, without excuses and without hurry to become someone else. This is the silent revolution of awakening. Discovering that you're already sufficient, already complete, already free, not in the future when you finally manage to change, but now, exactly as you are, carrying all your history, all your contradictions, all your realized and unrealized dreams, in a unique dance with existence itself that needs no audience or applause to be absolutely beautiful and meaningful.